Former FBI Director James Comey is set to testify on Capitol Hill Thursday. It will be his first public remarks since he was fired by President Trump last month. According to prepared testimony published by the Senate Intelligence Committee, Comey confirmed the president asked him for his loyalty and that he told the president he was not investigating him. The former director also wrote the president asked him to drop the probe into Michael Flynn to lift the cloud over him and asked what Comey was doing to clear him. For more on what to expect Thursday, CBS News political contributor and Washington Post political reporter Ed O'Keefe is on Capitol Hill. All right, so Ed, former FBI Director Comey released his opening statement before his testimony Thursday. What stood out to you?
I think what's really notable about this, Elaine, is how vividly Comey describes his interactions with the president, a few of them at least. He points out that in his interactions with Trump early on, he decided that he would need to keep notes of the conversations, saying that he had never done that when he met or spoke over the phone with President Obama, but that for whatever reason early on he realized he would probably have to do it with the current president. He describes conversations in late January, on Valentine's Day in the Oval Office, and another phone conversation in March, in which at different times, one point or another, the president is either asking for Comey's loyalty, questioning again whether or not Comey wants to have his job, even though they'd already discussed it, and then specifically asking that any FBI investigation steer away from the former National Security Advisor, Michael Flynn. What's notable here again is how vividly Comey remembers this and is recalling it all from memory. He said that what he would do is head back to his vehicle or back to his office, type out the memo as quickly as he could from memory. Notable, too, that this is a statement that is considered under oath, so he knows that this has to withstand legal scrutiny, in essence, and he is putting it all on the record out there for people to digest. And let me tell you, when that testimony landed this afternoon here at the Capitol, you suddenly saw everyone sort of stop and do this, Elaine. They just started reading the phone.
Right.
They were just, captured really by what he was saying and quite enthralled in it, because when it comes to congressional testimony, this was pretty vivid stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, what do you make, Ed, of the decision to release the opening testimony this early?
Important for people to remember this, because I realize and I appreciate that this is a congressional hearing that will be watched more closely than about 99.8% of all congressional hearings. Testimony is usually released in advance, either the morning of or the night before, from witnesses who are supposed to submit their written statement in advance for the committee to review, and also to know for certain that that witness has prepared some testimony. So whether it's this hearing or any other, it is customary, it is normal to have testimony released in advance. What's notable this time is how early in the day before it came. My understanding from conversations that the chairman of the committee, Richard Burr, had with other reporters is that he wanted to ensure, in part, that press coverage of what was going to be said tomorrow was accurate and reflected what Comey planned to say.
Well, what kind of questions, Ed, can we expect to hear tomorrow from Senate Intelligence Committee members?
I think they're really curious up here to know more, some of which is already outlined in his testimony, but more about what exactly was said between the director and the former director and the president in their conversations. And they're going to want to know whether what the president has described is backed up by what Comey remembers about these situations. In his written testimony, he only describes a few of the conversations, not all of them. And it's notable, he says, that he'd had at least 9 conversations to his recollection with the president, far more than he'd had with President Obama over the course of his term when the former president was in office. You're going to also hear a few of them, Democrats and Republicans, press him to explain why, if he was so concerned that the president was doing these things, he was only putting this in memos and sharing it with his most senior and closest aides, and not somehow expressing those concerns to others. There's been reporting this week from the New York Times that he had told the Attorney General, hey, don't leave me in a room alone with the president anymore, I'm uncomfortable about that. That may have been part of the signal to other officials that he was concerned about the president's behavior or statements. But I think that's something that Comey is going to be asked in one way or another, and it'll be interesting to see how he responds to it.
Well, the RNC responded to Comey's opening statement saying, quote, President Trump was right. Director Comey's statement reconfirmed what the president has been saying all along. He was never under investigation. How do you interpret that statement?
That's not the issue anymore, really, up here. It's notable that the Republican Party and others have been making this point, in the hours since the testimony was released, but given what Comey is saying, given what has now been reported about what the president has asked of other senior national security officials, it's less necessarily a concern of whether the president himself committed any crime or is the subject of an investigation, but there is the issue of whether he was trying to impede those investigations at all or try to obstruct justice, which is an impeachable offense. You don't hear the I word up here a lot just yet because members of both parties say there's no evidence of that. But what Comey may end up doing here is lay the groundwork or give a signal of where the special prosecutor's investigation is going into questions of perhaps whether or not the president was trying to impede or obstruct those investigations.
Also Wednesday, as you know, Ed, President Trump named a new FBI Director, Christopher Wray. Do you see this as counter-programming?
Some did up here for certain, Elaine, yes. They saw this as a way to try to change the subject and also to sort of get the news out there as Comey prepares to come here to Capitol Hill. That said, it seems to be that Republicans are somewhat pleased with this. Democrats are withholding judgment, but in a few statements made clear they're happy that he picked a law enforcement professional and Justice Department veteran to take the job. The only wrinkle for him potentially is the fact that Mr. Wray once served as an attorney for New Jersey Governor Chris Christie, who of course is a close associate of the president and who many believe may be in line for some kind of a job in the administration later on. He's likely to face some questions about that relationship, whether he would recuse himself from anything involving the governor if something were to come up at the Justice Department. But otherwise, it was sort of seen as like a, nice try, Mr. President, but we're still going to focus tomorrow on what the former director has to say.
All right, Ed O'Keefe on Capitol Hill for us. Ed, always great to see you. Thanks.
Take care, Elaine.